Welcome to week 3 of the Wander Quilt Along. This week we are going to talk about marking the blocks, and I think we have 2 different ways of doing that, of course, and stitching them together.
All right, let's go sew.
We're going to talk about marking, and of course Jenifer and I mark in 2 different ways using different tools. That's the beauty of the Quilt Along.
Well, and there's a lot of ways to do the same thing.
Yeah. So the way I do it, I really prefer the little chalk with the wheel because I feel like it doesn't pull the fabric. But I also like the little mechanical chalk pencils because it's nice and thin. Both of these have thin lines. So I just use this skinny ruler and just lay it at 1/4 of an inch and draw a quick line on either end and just go all the way around. So you can choose in the pattern. It says to just go ahead and mark all of them, and that's kind of nice because it's mindless work. You could just do them all, or you can do them as you go because you really only need half of these marks because half the time you'll be using the marks from the adjacent block. So basically that's how I mark.
That is good on dark fabrics. Do you still use the same chalk on light fabrics?
I do, but I do it at the last minute so I
Okay.
can see it because this chalk wipes off so quickly.
Right.
Whereas this will stay better.
Okay.
And I usually try to I have pencils that have different colors, so I can use them.
Whatever color you need.
So this is lighter.
Yeah,
because
you might
more
not
generous.
be able to see that on the tape, but
but
yeah, it
this will
shows up.
Yeah, it shows up, and this will stay on with more handling than this will.
Okay. Very good.
So
Okay,
that's mine.
so what I discovered was I didn't have time to do that. Well, I didn't make time to do it that way. I wanted to get to the sewing. So I just did my puppy chewed end of the disappearing ink or mark be gone. And I never can remember because sometimes they don't disappear. So you've got to be careful. So let's do the disappearing because I think it's supposed to disappear with air.
It is.
And the blue disappears with water. So I just I have this little 2.5 inch acrylic ruler that comes in handy for so many things, including this. And I just line up from the edge a little bit, the 1/4 inch is a little bit off the edge. So to account for the dot, and I just put a dot right there. And I just go around. And I discovered, like Trish said, you don't have to mark them all. It probably is easier at least to mark all of them for the first batch that you want to sew.
If you're new to piecing Y seams, do a bunch of them.
Right.
But yeah, now I just keep my ruler and my chalk on the bed of my sewing machine.
Right.
And mark them
And
as
then,
I go.
And I do that too. I just mark as I go.
Yeah.
And it's really nice. And then sometimes you'll find that you've marked the wrong side or...
Well, and then once you start getting your seams, the end of your seam lines become your marks.
Right, and so those won't need to be marked.
Those don't need to be marked.
But anyhow, there you go. That's how I do it. I'm inherently more lazy than Trish, so I always look for really fast shortcuts. But do be careful on these. Sometimes they don't disappear. Sometimes when you press them, that sets them.
Yeah.
So you just, you're taking a risk when you use this. Chalk is by far the better option.
Yeah, I
think
chalk because it comes out. Usually, I've had an issue with chalk once, but we won't discuss that.
It's always
it wasn't
something.
In piecing. It was in quilting.
So okay,
let's get to sewing.
So yep, let's do sewing.
This is how these 2 pieces were positioned on the design wall. I'll just put them right sides together. This is the seam line here, and just line up the cut edges on all 4 sides. And then I'm going to start stitching where these chalk lines intersect and end where these 2 intersect. Or if you do the dots, then at the dots. So I'll put the presser foot down, and I like to start with the needle down. And then I take 2 stitches forward, and then I take 2 stitches back, except I'm not on my machine. So that's 4. And then I just stitch to the other end. And I went one too far. And the problem with working with someone else's machine. So I'll just go back in and rip that one stitch out. And since they're back stitched over, it should be fine. So anyway, I'll raise my needle and pull that out of the way. Then I have my next set ready to go. And I'm just going to mark this. Sorry, my hand's in the way. Hello. Hi. How are you? Okay. So again, line up your hexagons. Should be just overlapping or on top of each other, just perfectly lined up. Okay, this time I'll try to do it right. Needle down, go 2 stitches forward, 2 stitches back. That's why I like to use a thin piecing thread as well, so you don't have too much bulk being built up. All right, so I'll just continue. I'll clip off this back piece. Oops. And I'll run over to the design wall to grab this next piece, and I'll just make large chunks and then I'll put the chunks together. Okay, so I have these 3 blocks together. I'm going to add the 4th. So this is where you get your inset seams. So I'm going to put them right sides together. And so normally I would like straight of grain here, but because of the design, I'm not doing that. I gotta make sure I have it right. Okay, there we go. So line up this hexagon with the one underneath it. And I'm going to sew from this side so I can see my seams that are stitched. So just try to make sure that's all lined up there and there. You kind of have to use your imagination a little bit. Okay. And then just pull this green one. I'm just pulling that out of the way so it doesn't get caught up in that seam allowance. Okay, I'm going to back stitch to the little start of the seam, which is just 1. So I'm just going to go, I like to have at least 2 back stitched. And then I'll just stitch all the way down. I'll pull, well, I'll show you. Now I'm going to make sure that this piece is out of the way so I don't stitch on top of it. And then just back stitch when you get to the end. Okay. And find where this is. There we go. All right, so now when I go to stitch, I just have these 2 to stitch. So I need to mark my starting point. And you can start at either end, but I kind of like to sew into my stitched area. And I only need to mark one side because the other side has a seam line, so I know where that is, or a stitch. So line these hexagons up. And now I'm going to just go down the seam line or the stitch line and pull this purple piece is folded in half and all the seams are out of the way. And I just hold this together. There we go. And then I'll stitch this side together the same way.
Open that up.
Okay, I prefer to wait until the whole quilt is sewn together before I do any pressing. So we'll just pretend this is the whole quilt. So I just flip it over to the wrong side, and I want to press it basically in a circular fashion so everything lies flat and out of the way. And this is why I like to do it all at the end, because then I don't lose track. I just start in one area and move across the quilt. Oops. And then you'll end up, at the intersections, you'll end up with this tiny little hexagon. And then that just leads you over to the next piece. Let me move this. So this one's already started. So I'll just continue in a circle. And this way everything lies nice and flat, and it reduces a lot of bulk. Nope, I did this one wrong. So this is coming down, so this is going over. It's always easiest just to start with the one that's done. And then come in here and get your little hexagon. So it seems slow and tedious, but it'll go quickly once you get started.
So that was week 3. Join us next week when we will be talking about quilting.